In this video of the circulatory system, I'd like to consider a single topic, the fetal circulatory system. We've already looked at the heart, and we know how the blood travels through the heart and have got a pretty good idea of how it travels through the body itself. But a fetal circulatory system has to be different because before a child is born, they're not breathing. So the pulmonary circuit is non-functional. The blood doesn't go to the lungs as it does in an adult heart. I want you, before we get into the topic, I'd like you to consider what would happen if there was a connection, in a different color here, if there's a connection here, so that blood could come out the pulmonary artery and go straight into the aorta. The effect of that, obviously, is that it would significantly decrease the blood that would go into the left lung or into the right lung. I'd also like you to consider what would happen if in the heart there was a connection that went from here, the right atrium, to here, the left atrium. So blood could go, say it went in here or down this way, through into the left atrium. It would bypass the right ventricle. That would further decrease the amount of blood that would possibly be destined for the lungs. The blood that could get through here to here would wind up going out the aorta by the left ventricle. That's exactly what happens in a fetal heart. Let me replace this picture with a different picture. Now, we have the ventricles, the atria, the pulmonary artery, pulmonary trunk, leading to the pulmonary artery would go to the right lung and to the left lung. But now in this picture, we have a fetal heart where you see this piece of blood vessel right here isn't present in an adult heart. This blood vessel is called the ductus. Ductus arteriosus. As well, in a fetal heart, there's a valve that interconnects the right atrium with the left atrium. So there's another valve. The heart has 4 valves, but a fetal heart actually has 5 valves. There's a valve which allows the blood to come from the right atrium into the left atrium. And it would continue its route around the fetal body by going out the aorta. This valve is called the foramen ovale. Latin names. We can call it the oval opening and the arterial duct. If you notice this heart, I've added another feature which wasn't present in the previous diagram, and that's this feature here. This is the inferior vena cava. This is a blood vessel we can call the venous duct. Or, if you look at the Latin names, ductus venosus. You see, before a baby's born, the blood isn't delivering nutrients from its digestive system because the digestive system isn't functional. They're not eating anything yet. And it's not delivering oxygen from its lungs because the lungs aren't functional. Those things which are still needed by the baby are coming in from the mother through the umbilical cord. I'm going to represent what that might look like here. If this is the umbilical cord, and this may be the mother on this side and this baby's over here, the umbilical cord interconnects the baby or the fetus to the mother via a structure called the placenta. And we'll talk about the placenta in just a minute. But what the umbilical contains in it is 3 blood vessels. This one is a vein. Notice the vein, the way I've drawn the arrow, the vein is taking blood towards the fetus. These 2 here are arteries. Those 2. So we have 1 umbilical vein and 2 umbilical arteries. The umbilical vein is coming from the placenta. The placenta is an organ of exchange. Quite simply what it is, it's an interface between the mother's system and the umbilical cord, which is the fetal system. And oxygen will cross, nutrients will cross, wastes from the fetus will cross going the opposite direction. So it's this organ which is extremely important during a pregnancy. So what we have is the umbilical vein, which conducts oxygen. So it carries oxygenated blood, nutrients into the baby. Once it comes in, it's coming in the umbilical cord, which is where the navel is. It's coming in at the belly button, and it has to go up to here. So that umbilical vein has to be able to make its way through the body. Well, in the middle of all of that, down here somewhere, is the liver. And this venous duct is actually a small duct through the liver, so it actually bypasses the function of the liver. So the blood will come into the baby and it'll go, without being treated by the liver, it'll go into the heart. If you think back to the functions of the liver destroys red blood cells, the liver stores glucose as glycogen, the liver makes bile and all that kind of stuff. All those functions are not required in this duct. The baby needs the nutrients right away. It needs the oxygen. It doesn't need to have all those functions take place. One of the things that is worth noting, one of the functions of the liver is to detoxify the blood. If the blood that's entering the baby is not detoxified, that means that toxins which may be traveling around in the mother's blood can get right through the liver and into the baby. So those are why the warnings are for ladies who are pregnant to not engage in things which could increase the toxin levels in their blood. It's very harmful to the baby. So just in summary now, there are really 4 things which make this system different from the adult system. There's the ductus arteriosus and the foramen ovale. Both of these 2 things allow the blood to bypass the lungs because the lungs aren't functional anyway. There's the umbilical cord, which is specialized with 3 blood vessels, and the ductus venosus, or the venous duct, which goes through the liver. Even so, this system is different. It still has to be preparing the baby to survive once it's born. This valve from the right atrium to the left atrium has to close somehow. This little blood vessel isn't needed. When the umbilical cord gets cut, the placenta and the umbilical cord aren't needed anymore. When a baby's born, one of the things that's so critical is to make sure it takes its first breath, and if it's a crying breath, that's even better. So you see pictures of doctors holding babies up by their heels and slapping them, and then wah, the baby cries, and you know there's the first breath is a good breath. The effect of that is really, really, really important, because what happens as soon as the baby inhales, the lungs expand. The lungs previously were dense tissue, and blood couldn't really get through them anyways, but now that they're expanded, the blood can get through. So that increases the amount of blood that can travel into the lungs. The effect of that is, of course, it's going to decrease the amount of blood in the ductus arteriosus. With a decreased amount of blood in this ductus arteriosus, the endothelial cells inside it, the ones that line the lumen, they start dividing by mitosis, and it actually grows closed. The other thing that happens as soon as the baby takes its first breath and blood comes around and goes into the lungs and comes out of the lungs for the very first time, it comes into the left atrium. There was no blood arteries before. Now the blood comes in the left atrium, and the pressure in here snaps that valve shut. So blood can no longer go from the right atrium to the left atrium. Blood has to go from the right atrium, right ventricle, around into the lungs, because this is being closed. The lungs are filling with air, the blood's going through, it's being oxygenated properly, and the system is adult-like. It takes a few days for this to grow closed. It takes a few days for the valve here to grow closed, but it happens. Even in an adult heart, there is a ligament, there's a trace of ligament here that used to be the ductus arteriosus. It's called the ligamentum arteriosum. Latin name. It's the arterial ligament now, and it basically holds the pulmonary artery and the aorta together. The venous duct, no longer useful, no longer being used, because the umbilical cord has been cut, there's no blood traveling through it, and it's no longer used, so it just atrophies. It just becomes a piece of scar tissue in the liver. That's the conclusion of this part of the topic. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, if you'd like to know when my next videos get posted, please subscribe.